along the lines, too, that were complimentary, but they did mention that our process, the caucus process, allows hijacking, the fact that caucus votes are not binding, and they have concern when caucus votes do not match the delegates selected to convention, and if leaders are not neutral. So that seemed to be one of the concerns that was throughout the comments. But the survey does, if you go to the survey and actually look at that, you can read these comments just by clicking on the comments. You can read them in full. It takes you to 10 per page or 50 per page, whatever your computer allows. So it was a very interesting couple hours reading the comments.
I had a chance to read through them myself. And Mary, thank you very much for doing this. And they're all available to all of you if you want to look at those comments. Any questions or thoughts for Mary? Thank you very much, Mary. The next order of business, these are preliminary recommendations that the subcommittees have come up with, and the recommendations have been distributed to members, and there are some extra copies that were put over there on the table so others can see them as well. But looking at the agenda, our first subcommittee is the Public Information Subcommittee, chaired by David Ullman. David?
Bill, thank you. Does everyone on the committee have this sheet dated May 23rd? Gwen is bringing some over. James, Kathy, and others can discuss you have to follow along. To be brief, I want to just pick up on what we heard Bill say about 15 or 20 minutes ago, where he talked about a possible choice in the caucuses of organizing the parties or putting on a show. And Mike just respectfully suggests that you could reframe that to talking about doing the party's business and doing the people's business. And when you think about the fact that 120,000 Republicans meeting in 1,700 unique caucuses, Amana County was the first in our country begin doing the people's business, selecting a major party nominee, and hopefully the next president of that state. That is also serious business. And so when our subcommittee began its deliberation before the Ankeny meeting, Bill, and before we started to share ideas or sift them, we talked about goals for the Public Information Subcommittee. What could our goals be that would help guide us and navigate us through this process? And they came down to three pretty simple goals in terms of reporting the results, not tabulating, not training, that's the purview of other subcommittees. But when it comes to getting the information out, the goals that we came up with are very simple. Get the results right, get them fast, and do it without spin. And those have been guiding principles, if you will, for the work we've done for the past 60 days. We've had one phone conference call and two in-person meetings, and under your guidance, Bill, of not coming up with a laundry list or not having the whole group come up with a really long laundry list, we set a goal for our own committee of 3 or 4 bullets. And so you'll see 4 bullets in front of you. These are draft recommendations, and they're preliminary recommendations. Our intent, I think, Bill, tonight is to simply share with our colleagues what we're thinking about. And we would welcome your comment. We will come back as a subcommittee, as I think the others will, and reflect on what we hear tonight, and then we'll share this information and come back together as a city and hopefully take final action. Right. So this is draft, and it's also preliminary. I'm not going to read these verbatim. They're fairly self-explanatory, but I'll touch on them, and then we'll pause, see if there's any comments that you'd like to share. The first one is really process, but against the second goal of getting the results out timely, it was suggested that as part of the training, we've heard a lot about training, that the caucus chairs be reminded to move to the straw poll as soon as is practical. Obviously, people come and late, caucus gets organized, but when it is, get about your business, move it ahead, and that the counting and the reporting of results could be front-loaded and could occur when the rest of the caucus business is undertaken, with the goal of getting the results into the state party as soon as practical. Now we get into the more serious recommendations from our group. Our subcommittee is recommending to the full committee. The full committee in turn recommend that the announcement of statewide results be released to all media and any other interested parties at one time. That no results should be communicated on an exclusive basis, and that when those results are reported, they be known as uncertified results. And we would recommend that at the county level, for instance in Lynn, where there's a lot of activity and a lot of interest, and obviously curiosity about the numbers, as we've heard this evening, that those should be discussed as uncertified results. And I know later on in the other committees we'll talk about the process of certifying and the timing of all that. But under the process that we have now, the numbers that are released on caucus night are uncertified. Again, what we have this time was probably the best run caucuses we've ever had. We just happened to have a photo finish at the end. And the photo finish had uncertified results that were just extraordinarily close. And so we think it's important that they are discussed as such. These are raw numbers just in the door. They're not certified. Second important recommendation from our committee is that if the top two candidates are within, or if the margin rather is under 1%, that no winner be declared on caucus night by the chairman or whomever it is that is announcing the results. In this year's instance, that would mean a margin of 1,200 votes, with 120,000 people voting. If the margin is over 1,200 votes in the universe of 120,000, most of the experts with whom we talk believe that you're not going to change those numbers that much. But if it's within 1%, the results would be shared as uncertified. Nobody would officially be declared the winner. If a news outlet wanted to do a Dewey beats Truman headline, that would be their job. Finally, our group discussed this at some length and recommended that the certification process be abbreviated. I know there's some who almost suggest we could do away with it and use technology, do it all real time in the moment. Maybe we're a little old-fashioned, but we thought that certifying results still makes sense. Adds gravity, adds credibility to the numbers, but that it is 2012. The next time we do this, it will be 2016, and we probably could do it in under 2 weeks. And so the recommendation from Jamie and Gwen and Wes and myself is that we look at 72-hour certification. That would mean people in the precincts, county chairs, and others helping county by county would have some work to do. Get your homework in. It would be the mantra. And certified results would be announced by the state party that week and done ahead of the New Hampshire primary. So there's no ambiguity coming out of Iowa pre any other event in any other state what the results were in this state. And obviously that those results would be announced as certified, and as before, those results would be given to all media, all interested parties at one time, none released on an exclusive basis. What have I left out? I think that represents the work of our subcommittee. We'd welcome your feedback or comment. Let's start, if we could, with the committee, and I see some people have some questions or comments back. Is there anybody, Bill, on the task force?
We're going to, yes, well, Wes and Gwen, of course. Yeah, we're going to speak for the committee here, and starting with Wes or Gwen, if you have anything to add to these recommendations.
I don't think I have anything to add to them. I stand behind each one of those ideas very strongly. I think what we had in this particular instance with the very close finish, we did, as we've discussed several times, have an instance where the state chairman was pushed, I think, in a sense, to get results out. He made that call, and that's neither here nor there. But the problem is, we'd like to in the future avoid that problem. Because I think other than that, the caucus process was a very well-run process, and there was a lot of praise for it, even in the survey results that we received back. Where we seem to fall down is in that reporting, and I think the problem with the reporting is simply that results were announced before results were really ready, and then we had to go back and change what we'd said, issue different press releases and try to alleviate confusion. I think we've addressed the problem. I think that it's a fair way to do it. It's a way that future chairs can look to as a guide, and even as a shield when they're pushed on caucus night. If you run into this problem, there is something in place where the chairman can say, look, if less than 1%, here are the results. I cannot declare a winner. We'll get back to you with certified results in 72 hours. It's not a long time frame. It's not like asking them for 2 weeks' notice. I think they all sort of flow together, and I think I stand behind them. I think they're very solid.
Thank you, Wes, and David, and Gwen. Thank you for these recommendations.
I really have nothing else to add. I think that we covered a lot of ground and we looked to what can simplify by kind of setting the guidelines and even to the county level. So it also protects that chair at the county level.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we looked at a lot of things that these are well and
Thank you very much.
I might just add a P.S. that as part of our work, we also had one session where we invited journalists to come and talk with us, give us their perspective. We have a job to do. Party people have a job to do. They have a job to do too. So we thought it would be appropriate to invite them to share whatever observations or suggestions they have, and it's sort of fun to flip the process and ask them questions for a change. But we had 5 journalists appear at that meeting. We had 3 who did give us comments, and they were.
David, thank you very much for your working committee members. I do have a question on recommendation number 1. Is it the feeling of the subcommittee that the caucuses do not start at this 7 o'clock, that the presidential preference poll does not typically start at this time? Why was that recommendation necessary, I guess?
We heard some modest information about some caucuses taking the time to get around to this raw poll or the counting. I think it's a small issue. Maybe shouldn't lead our set of recommendations.
people were arriving late, not coming.
Yeah. All right.
And from the perspective of our committee, for the most part, we're dealing with public relations. We're dealing with trying to get results in because people from around the world are watching. Get them the results as quickly as we can. And that's just the recommendation that they start with the presidential preference poll. I don't think it's a huge problem, but it's a point we'd like to emphasize.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll go to, this is going to be committee discussion time. We'll have time for questions.
The only thing you guys forgot to mention is the people that can speak for candidates. If you start with the poll right away, half the people come that don't know. They're undecided until they get there, and they hear people that speak up for the candidates, but you didn't spell anything out about those.
And that's a point well taken, Mary, and that's something we'll discuss, no question about it. These are all very preliminary, and we're going to continue with the committee here. And we're going to go on to the other recommendations to hear from the other subcommittees. And let me just talk about process here for a minute, and that is that you'll notice next we'll have the recommendations from the Operations and Tabulation Subcommittee. You'll notice some differences between the recommendations from one subcommittee to the next. And that's fine, and that's a good thing. Those will be points of discussion. And then in terms of the process, my thinking is that our co-chair, Mary, and myself, after we hear from people here, after we hear from other people around the state, toward the end of June, before our meeting in Sioux City, Mary and I will get together, look at the differences, get together with our subcommittee chairs, and Mary and I will work on hammering out the final draft for your approval. So that's kind of the way we see the process coming together. But with that, David Chung is chair of the Operations Subcommittee. David, the floor is yours, sir.
All right, thank you, Bill. As Bill said, our subcommittee was charged with looking at operations and tabulation. We've looked at that a couple different ways, but really we're looking at caucus night operations. However, I think Bill had to give a disclaimer about the committees maybe not agreeing with one another because he saw that our committee report differs from the other David's committee report in some areas. One thing we've discovered through the process is that none of these items stand in isolation. They all have have impact on the way the caucuses are viewed by the media, on the way the caucus operates, on the way training has to be formed and delivered to caucus leaders and caucus participants. So with that in mind, I'll present our preliminary recommendations. We came up with recommendations in 4 specific areas. We actually had recommendations in probably 20, but we narrowed it down to those areas that we considered to be very important and those that fell within the purview of what our charge was. The 4 areas are same-day certification, ballot security, late arrivals, and the caucus agenda. And as I said, some of these have been addressed and will be addressed by the other committees as well. The first question was on certification. Some of the history of that, the Iowa Code used to require us to certify caucus results. And one of the questions we've asked is, what is meant by certification? What it is meant this time around is that after receiving the caucus night results, that the various precincts would send in to the counties would send in the Form E containing the appropriate signatures of caucus officers with the official vote totals, and that would be the certified result. That's different significantly from the way we canvass regular elections, because at that point we go all the way back to the ballot, and we do a canvass of individual ballots, whereas here we're canvassing the summary sheets, if you will, of the result. And one of the questions we asked was, clearly, everyone agreed that certification process took too long. There was a lot of discussion about whether to do away with it. But what we said was, if certification means making sure that the numbers received at the tabulation center are the numbers that the precinct intended to send to the tabulation center, if that's what certification really means, we believe that we can do it even with today's technology that night. And 4 years, actually I hope the next time we do a presidential preference poll is 8 years in the future. I can't predict what the technology landscape will look like by then, but I'm confident, and our committee was confident, that even 72 hours is more than enough time, and we really believe that those numbers can be confirmed back to the precinct, where people know the numbers, where they've seen the count occur, where they have confidence in those numbers, that the precinct can confirm those that night. And that we can leave that caucus night knowing what our official, what's called certified, but what the actual count is, and confidently give that to a waiting state, nation, and world. So same-day certification, it was our #1 recommendation. Again, hoping that we'll have advances in technology, wider distribution of broadband to rural precincts, and so on. But even today, using standard phones, we believe this is doable. What is the actual mechanism? That's a little bit TBD as technology changes. As I said, 8 years out from now, we should be able to do something here. Another issue that came up was ballot security. And I saw that referenced in the survey as well. People said they provide official ballot. They were talking about the possibility for mischief. And one of the things that we talked about in our subcommittee was limiting the possibility for mischief. That rather than, if there's a statewide ballot, that someone may be able to tamper with that or something at that broad level, but to minimize the possibility for mischief. So if someone goes into our caucus with a bad intent, they can't do any damage beyond that individual precinct, and even that we want to make as hard as possible. So some suggestions on ballot security. One was, we learned by talking to people from various caucuses that ballots were distributed differently across the state. In some places, ballots were given out at registration. You showed your ID, you registered, you received a ballot. Other places, everyone was seated and then the ballots were passed out. And we felt that ballots should be distributed at registration, and if you lose a ballot, sorry, you lost a ballot. We're not going to give out more ballots if that's the case, so people need to hold on to them. Completed ballots. We also heard that ballots were collected in different ways. They'd be passed down the center aisle, like you might do, or people would pass different hats around. The suggestion was made that precincts endeavor to have a sealed ballot box. They can go, individuals can walk up and place their ballot in that box. They don't have to count on the person next to them passing their ballot on and doing that for them. So again, confidence in the process of local precinct. the agenda, and this dovetails nicely with what David's committee had about the agenda, starting the presidential preference poll early in the process. We felt it was important not only to define when in the process the presidential poll occurred, but to set aside time for the counts to occur in the agenda in front of the body. Rather than sending, and I'm guilty of this, as a precinct leader, I typically sent my counters off to a different room so we could get on with other business. But leave the ballots in the room where they're collected, where they're counted, in view of representatives of the campaigns, and in view of the whole body. And again, limiting the possibility for mischief. Some of these proposals are sort of preemptive. We weren't hearing that there was a lot of mischief. But again, we want to make sure that the process is something that Iowans can be very confident in. And lastly, ballots should be counted in the main caucus room, again, not just in front of the representatives of the campaigns, but in front of the entire caucus. And we would have suggestions for the training committee later about how that ballot counting should be done as well, more detail than go into this report. The next area was late arrivals. That was a pretty common theme. Not a huge deal in many caucus sites, but there were late arrivals, and it was worse this year because of redistricting. Also, given the amount of lead time we had before we had a caucus date nailed down, there were a lot of caucuses that weren't in their quote-unquote usual place, and people weren't in the same precincts. And many of us experienced as caucus leaders, people coming in, we've had to tell somebody, oh, your caucus is meeting across the street or even across town. So I think that we need to be sympathetic to those people to the degree that we can. We won't hold the straw poll for them, but if someone arrives at the caucus before the straw poll, we felt that we should take every possible measure we can to get them registered, get them a ballot, let them participate, rather than turning them away. So we felt that was important. And then the caucus agenda, as we said, those things related to counting and reporting and confirming the count, what we're calling certification, should be on the agenda, clearly spelled out, done in front of the entire caucus body. And we felt that would help build confidence in the caucus process, and not just build confidence, but help the accuracy of the caucus process as a whole. So those are our preliminary suggestions. And Bill, I don't see it from the agenda, but I will say our committee has not yet had a public meeting, a subcommittee hasn't. And we're planning in some form in connection with the state convention on Friday, we're planning on having for the Operations and Tabulation Subcommittee a public meeting inviting public input on our specific suggestions. We felt that the Des Moines is a central location. Yes, I know, I live in Linn County too. But a lot of us are going to be down there for the convention, and that we get the widest range of Republican activists there and give them the opportunity to interact with the subcommittee.
Yes. David, thank you for the good work, and thank you, committee members, for your good work. And just regarding the additional public input, I have talked with Drew and AJ about setting up room 4 p.m. on that Friday as people are arriving, where delegates can come by and make comments on, and I know Kathy from the training subcommittee and any other committee members that want to be there to hear your comment on these preliminary recommendations would be a good thing. Martha, I see your hand. I'll get to you, but not right now.
Thank you.